Well, hi, I'm Dr. Tom Ulrich, and I like to talk about leadership and engineering. Hey, in this video, I'd like to say a few things about the notion of personality. Now, the first thing I'd say about personality is we have to understand is when we say someone's personality, all we're saying is this is kind of a description of how they usually respond. My point is that saying, oh, that's his personality, that's her personality, that doesn't excuse anything. I mean, if we look at a serial killer, their pattern of behavior is they tend to go about killing people. It doesn't mean it's okay. So the fact that something is a part of someone's personality does not in any way justify behavior. So you can't look at some middle-aged cranky engineer and say, well, you just have to understand that's how he is. Well, all you're saying is, that's how he usually reacts. It doesn't mean it's okay. And indeed, for a healthy engineering organization, the last thing you want to do is tolerate people who have got serious problems like that. At any rate, so personality tends to be very stable. It is hard to change personality, but not impossible. Now, I'll do a separate video on Myers-Briggs, and one maybe at the same time I'll address this Enneagram thing that's getting to be so popular. But let me clarify at this point. The four sort of parts of Myers-Briggs, those are not any kind of scientifically established dimensions of personality. In fact, I recently saw a television show where they wanted the psychologist to seem like he knew something about personality, so they had him say the four Myers-Briggs things. Those are not the dimensions of personality. That's not what the science says. We'll get to that in another video. But what do we know from the science? People have been studying this for a long time, and so up till about 2000, the overwhelming consensus is people talk about the big five personality factors, and these are sort of dimensions of personality. There's a handy acronym you can use to remember these. O.C.E.A.N. So the first one is openness to experience. So someone who's just sort of let's try it as opposed to just kind of against everything new. The second dimension is conscientiousness, and so that's this idea of being very meticulous and not leaving anything to details. In general, that's a very desirable trait, in engineers. The next one is extroversion, so that's the opposite of introversion, and that has to do with whether being around people charges your batteries or depletes your batteries. So it's often misunderstood to mean whether or not you're articulate. So people would often look at me and say, oh, he's an extrovert, and nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, if I'm around a lot of people for a long period of time, I just need to go sit quietly in a room by myself, because I'm sort of recharged when I'm by myself, whereas an extrovert needs other people to recharge. Another dimension is agreeableness, and that's the extent to which it's important to you to sort of when things are brought up, that you sort of agree as opposed to being the person who's always against everything. And the final one is neuroticism, and that one sounds horrible. It sounds worse than it really is. What it means, it's kind of the opposite of emotional stability. And so someone who's highly neurotic would be someone who sort of flies off the handle and reacts and kind of up and down, as opposed to emotionally stable as, kind of your more even keel. So those are the big five personality factors. And in 2000, Ashton Lee actually proposed, they've got some data that shows, it really does look like there's a sixth one. And that sixth one's called honesty, humility. Now, it's not like those are opposite. It's like on one end of the spectrum, you've got this honesty / humility. Those kind of go together because true humility kind of comes from being honest with yourself. And so that's the one extreme, and kind of the lack of humility and dishonesty kind of forms the other extreme. So, and that one we say the acronym is H.E.X.A.C.O. So it's honesty, humility. We say emotionality. So instead of saying neuroticism, we say emotionality. And then the X is extroversion. The A is agreeableness. The C is conscientiousness. And the O is, like O.C.E.A.N, is openness to experience. And Any rate, and a common mistake is when you talk to people, they talk like each one of those are binary things. Well, are you introverted or extroversion? It's probably a little bit better to view each one of those scales as 0 to 100. So, it's pretty rare that you would have someone who would absolutely peg any one of those. And it's also should be noted that personality tends to be highly context specific. I mean, if you're around your family, you're exhibit certain personality traits when you're around strangers. So it's bottom line is humans are very complex, and we don't do anybody a service by trying to reduce them to um, thinking, oh well, there's only 16 types of people or 9 types of people or things like that. I mean, that's absurd. So if you think about each one is 0 to 100 or 1 to 100, that means since you have 5 of them, you have 100 to the 5th sort of combinations, which of course is, I think that's, see, 10 to the 2 to the 5th, that's 10 to the 10th, so that's 10 billion combinations, and there's about 6 billion people on the planet right now, so you can see that, it really is, there's room for everybody's unique. It really is absurd to sort of, come to somebody and say, oh, you're like this. Now, it's true, these, people, you can sort of group them, if you did sort of a factor analysis, you can kind of locate them. But the point is, let's not be ridiculous and oversimplify people, and remember that in every context, the personality is not consistent. I guess the other point I would make too is, although the personality tends to be relatively stable, it is not that it cannot be changed. Certainly myself, I would say I was very low on agreeableness, say 35 years ago, and I'm actually pretty far on the other end of things now. And there was, that was a real conscious effort to change that. At any rate, that's sort of a primer on the dimensions of personality. In subsequent videos, we'll talk about how that correlates with leadership. We'll talk, maybe do one on Myers-Briggs, and we'll do one on this, maybe at the same time on the Enneagram. At any rate, I'm Dr. Tom Ulrich. I'm the engineering leadership guy. I've got more videos on all things related to leading engineers at tomulrichconsulting.com. If you're on YouTube, you can just search on Dr. Tom Ulrich. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you later.